Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hernia Patient Support Group and to our live chat tonight. I am delighted to be able to invite you, sorry, introduce you to Jan Paul, who is our guest tonight, who is going to be talking to us about diastasis recti. Jan Paul is a specialist physiotherapist from the Netherlands um, with a special interest in this condition, and we're delighted to have him with us tonight. This talk is being recorded and it will be available to watch on YouTube at a later date, later tonight or tomorrow. If you do want to ask some questions, then please use the function at the bottom of the screen and we'll ask Jan Paul shortly. So, Jan Paul, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you,
Um,
Jackie,
it's
for
really
inviting me.
no. Diastasis recti, I think we said this earlier, didn't we? That it's a condition that affects a lot of people, but not a lot of people know much about it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stories about it, and there's a lot of things. If you look at the internet, a lot of things that people say what you should do, shouldn't do. There's a lot of confusion, and maybe the story tonight can maybe clear up some of the ideas behind the idea of diastasis recti. So I hope I can give you some information and something to work on.
Okay, thank you. So Jan Paul's got a short presentation for us to
Yep.
explain about the condition and what we can maybe do to help with this.
I'll share my screen, Jackie.
Yes, please.
Okay, let's see where can I find it. Here it is.
There you go.
Yeah. Now you see us together.
Yes, I do.
That's
There we
right.
go. Thank you.
Okay. Shall we start?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll go ahead. So, welcome everybody to this presentation. Thank you, Jackie, for inviting me to do this presentation.
Thank
Uh,
you.
I will I will give you some background on how we came to this idea and what we did, and the consequences for what you could do if you have a diastasis recti. So let's get started. So I work for the Dutch Rehabilitation Center, the Spine and Joint Center. And I'm going to talk about the secrets of diastasis recti and everything you wanted to know, but never dared asking to anyone. So let's get started. First of all, I have to give a small, really small introduction about who I am and where I work. I work in this very nice building over there in this Indian summer style photograph, and it's a rehabilitation center. What we mainly treat is patients with chronic pain, chronic back pain, chronic pelvic pain. And for this treatment, we very much focus at a functional recovery. So we treat pain patients, but we want to treat them by making them improve their physical function, which causes the pain to get less, and not just merely get rid of the pain right away, because that's another kind of treatment. So functional recovery. And why am I saying that? Because in this functional recovery, the control of the abdominal wall is very important. I will show you that later in the presentation, that with chronic pain on the pelvis and the back, what you do with your abdominal wall is just very key to controlling this. So what we also do is that we focus on self-control of patients. So we hardly touch patients. We don't do the exercises. They do the exercises themselves. And so they get really by themselves control over their problem, what they have. So we treat about 650 patients annually, and we do also a lot of research and science in this because we find things and we don't understand, and we try to figure out what's happening. And that led us to what we now try to reveal about diastasis recti. So let's start talking about diastasis recti. So the first question you can ask, what exactly is the problem if we talk about diastasis recti? Some people say, well, it's the distance. After I'm pregnant, I got this increased distance between my abdominal muscles. I can feel it, and I think that's a problem. Some have some asymmetry after pregnancy, and they think that's the problem. And some others have a functional problem. They have maybe back pain or pelvic pain. They can't lift their children, and they think it's caused by the diastasis recti. So, what exactly is the problem? Then, if you look at the dominant view about diastasis recti, it mostly has to do with pregnancy. And the idea is that if your uterus is growing, your child is growing inside, you need more space. And for some idea, we think the fascia tissue of your abdominal is stretching, especially the linea alba, and that's causing, in the end, after pregnancy, the diastasis recti. And the idea is that once this diastasis is overstretched, it cannot return to its original situation. And that may be the cause behind diastasis recti. I will show you that this notion, this idea, is not correctly. But this is the main idea, which is very all over the planet on how this diastasis recti occurs. So let's have a closer look at what's happening. Actually, it's not only with pregnancy. We also see the same kind of appearance of this bulging or the gap in other situations. The first one is pregnancy, but the second one is with people with low back and pelvic complaints. We see them very often in these patients, male and female. I just did a study which showed that above a certain age, there are just as many males with diastasis recti as females, so there's no difference. And we also see them very often post-surgical. So these are the three main situations. And one of the things we were thinking about is, could there be a common mechanism? Could there be something which affect them all? And well, actually, males don't get pregnant, so pregnancy cannot be the main cause of diastasis recti. So what's happening here? We just didn't understand. And then there's this other thing. If we talk about diastasis recti, what are we talking about? Are we talking just only about the divarication, the distance between the rectus muscles? Or are we also talking about the bulging that sometimes occurs if people make some pressure in their abdomen? What exactly is the diastasis recti? And are we talking about two different problems? Or is this maybe the same problem with two different aspects? So what's the mechanism? And then we got this patient. This was one of our pelvic pain patients. And if you see, if she lifts her leg, you see the diastasis recti coming out. I'll show you again. The same. Look at this. She's lifting her leg and you see the diastasis. It's not a very big one, but it's definitely there. Then we give her an instruction, what we usually do with our pain patients, within 5 minutes. Look what's happening. Oh, sorry. I'll do it here. Here it goes. No, it was the first one. Sorry, going back to the next one. This is the next one. 5 minutes instruction. You just see a little flicker there of the diastasis coming back, but there is control. I'll show you again. It's hardly there. And the question is, what did she do? What did she do that she could control within 5 minutes? And really, it was 5 minutes to control this. And I'm going to show you some more, because here we got an echo animation, an echo recording of what's happening in your abdomen if you control your abdomen. And I'll show you what's going to happen. First of all, here you got the rectus muscle. On the left, this is the image you see. So this part here is the same part here. Then you got the linea alba, which is the white thin line here. Here it's a bit bigger than it's here. It's just very small here, but that's the white line. And then on the side, you can't see it on the picture there, you have the deep abdominal muscle, transverse abdominis muscle. Now, what's going to happen in the movie is that first this person is going to make a kind of curl up, which increases intra-abdominal pressure. And while making the curl up, you will see that the rectus muscle, this one, so this one over here, will get more round. But at the same time, because of the intra-abdominal pressure, you will see the linea alba being pushed outward. This is the bulging you've seen. But then we ask the subject to contract the deep transverse muscle. You can't see that in the echo, but you see the result in the linea alba, which is pulled down. So, with all this explanation, let's start this video. Look what's happening. First, you get bulging here. It's getting round, it's going up. And then transverses. Relax, transverses again. I'll show you again, once more. Down and up. So, rectus is contracted, it's round. But you see, now it's relaxed. It's getting round again. Contraction of transverses, and it comes down. So what you see in this image, that contraction of the rectus abdominis muscle can actively control the pulling out, the bulging of the linea alba. And that's what you saw in the lady previously. But then from this picture, we come into a different problem because, and I hope I can switch that. Yeah, here we go. Oh, sorry, I was. This, what you see here, is standard anatomy. The anatomy from Mr. Netter, drawn also in other atlases. This is what you always see if we talk about the abdominal wall. This is the rectus muscle. That's the nice things you see in the bodybuilders in their abdominal wall, very thick and round. I don't know what you call them. I think, no, I don't know. Never mind. Here you see the other abdominal muscles, the extern oblique, intern oblique, and deep transverse or deep abdominal muscle. And this is your standard anatomy. The problem is that with this kind of anatomy, we cannot explain what we saw previously. So we thought, what's happening here? We don't understand. So we did some more research. We did this research on it was a cadaver study. And what we did, we opened up some cadavers to have a better look at the abdominal wall. And this is what we found. Beware, there are dirty pictures there. So what we found is this is the linea alba. And I hope you can see my mouse here moving. This part is about 2 centimeters. This part is the anterior wall of the abdomen, and this part is the posterior wall of the abdomen. This, the brownish stuff here and there, are both rectus muscles. Now, what you see here, the linea alba is thick and very small, about less than 2 centimeters. But what you see more is that the anterior part of the abdominal wall is connected to the rectus muscle, and the back part is not connected to the rectus muscle. This is very important. I'll show you later on. But what we have to see now is that this ligament is very firm and strong, and it is very able and capable of resisting lateral force. I'll show you later on. So what we thought is, well, this kind of structure is not likely to stretch very much. So how can we explain a diastasis recti by stretching of this very firm ligament? It doesn't make sense. So we had to look further on. So the first thing we concluded is this anatomy is not correct. The anatomy it should be is like this. The anterior part of the rectus is connected to the fascia, but the posterior part is loose. Here you got a sliding mechanism. That means that both deep abdominal muscles, this one and this one, have a direct connection behind the abdominal wall. If they both contract, they pull in your abdominal wall, which is an interesting conclusion. Why should we use that? Why do we need that? Well, we'll come to that later. First is, I already showed you the posterior fascia sheet of the abdominal wall. And here we took out some of the fascia sheet and we pulled on it. We did it with some sensors, but we just to show it to you, we also really pulled on it. Now, this direction is up and down from the head to your toes, longitudinal. And the other direction, this one, is in this direction. So we first pull in the longitudinal direction and then in the transverse direction. Look what happens. If we pull longitudinal, it's like an elastic band. It's very stretchy. But if we pull laterally, it does not stretch. So just as the linea alba, the whole posterior fascia is very resisting to lateral stretch. Now, why would that be? In this direction, I can imagine, because if you want to breathe or inhale or flex or bend, you need this elasticity. But why do we need this kind of tissue in this direction? Well, I'll show you. Our abdomen is like a hull, like a balloon with fluid. Our intestines, they behave like fluid. And fluid always wants to come down with gravity. So what we need is some structure like this corset here, which pulls our abdominal content together. And that is exactly what this whole posterior line is doing. You can see it here. If deep abdominal muscle is pulling, it pulls the whole line backwards and controls our abdominal content. That's the purpose of this muscle. So if we know that, then we understand what happens if someone is doing this. If you make a curl up like this, you increase the intra-abdominal pressure. But if your deep transverse muscle is not functioning properly, the abdominal content will be pulled out between the rectus muscles. And in this motion, that will give the bulging you see. But only in the early phase, the bulging is very low. So how can we explain the lateral transfer of the rectus muscles? Well, first of all, this tissue can slide underneath and give much more space than only the stretching of the linea alba. And in pregnant women, that's very logical, because if you have to wait for the linea alba to stretch, that takes a long time. But if you relax transverse abdominis muscle and it comes forward, you get a lot more space right away, instantly. So in pregnant women, probably the transverse abdominis will be suppressed to allow the growth of the uterus, which is quite logical. And then we have a lot of information about disturbed function of transverse abdominis muscle from back pain patients, but not from the diastasis people. But there's a kind of same mechanism happening here. But how can we explain then that the diastasis can become so big? Well, if you have this mechanism, over time, with every stretch, the rectus muscles are just pulled laterally just a bit. And while transversus could pull without pulling the rectus laterally, the other both muscles, internus and externus, they pull the rectus laterally because of their attachment. So if the function of the abdominal wall is disturbed and deep transverse abdominis is not functioning properly, but internal and external are working harder, they will be pulling rectus laterally, and that will increase the distance in this part of the abdomen. So our conclusion, our idea, our notion is that we have to talk about disturbed contraction of transverse abdominis muscle. It's not so much a structural problem, it's a functional problem. And we know this from our low back and pelvic pain patients. So like I said, it's more a functional problem than a structural problem. And because it's a functional problem, there may be space for improvement. And that's the good news. So the question is it possible to improve diastasis recti by doing exercises? Well, within limitations, I have to make that sure, within limitations, yes, there are possibilities. And how do we do that? Well, here you get a movie of one of our other patients with a rather large diastasis recti, as you see. And now we're going to ask her to contract, and you see that she can functionally control diastasis recti. As soon as she relaxes, you see some bulging, but functionally she can control diastasis recti. And now I have to make a remark, because I think some people, they have a problem with diastasis recti, not so much functionally, but aesthetically. So in this lady, like you see, there's a lot of space in the abdominal skin tissue. You cannot correct that by training. So if we call the diastasis problem an aesthetic problem with the skin, then we have to do something else, like plastic surgery or something like that. But if we talk about the functional aspect, we can do some training. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, look at this. This is the same lady lifting her legs, and she can make so much power that she can really control her diastasis, even with high forces. So what kind of exercises are we talking about? First of all, if you want to do the exercises, lay down relaxed. You can do it standing up, but you can do it in a later phase. First, if you have some diastasis, you have to get the load on your abdomen. You have to get it down. So lay down on a supine, and then we're going to use only very little resistance. One of the mistakes people make is that they try to work too hard, get too much power in, and that's one of the biggest mistakes. You really have to start really low level. So to get some force in there, you can use an elastic band or maybe a pulley like in a fitness in a gym. There are these equipments where you have this string with something you can hold with a weight, but only use very light weights. And then be gentle. The exercise I'm going to show you, they're about coordination. They're not about power. Only when you have the coordination, then you can build up power. If you start too quick in the power, you're going to be counterproductive. So please don't do that. It's about coordination. And another thing you have to imagine is if you do the exercises, don't hold your breath, don't fix, but maybe even try to exhale as much as possible. I'll show you later on why that is so important. And then if you do the exercise, it's only very small motions. It's like a distance like this, not very big motions from one side to the other side, very small, because the control is difficult. So make it easy on yourself, use small motion and no bulging showing. The moment you do the exercise and you have bulging, it's too heavy or you're doing something wrong, go back and try again. Don't force yourself in exercising while there's bulging showing. That's not the right path. So, what does the exercise look like? Well, like I said, there are two aspects. First of all, there's a problem with the rectus muscle because if you have a diastasis, the push of the abdominal content is pulling the rectus muscles apart. So the first thing you have to do is address rectus muscle to get some more power in there. And the way you have to do that is not like this. This is very counterproductive. And why? In this exercise leads to a diminishing of the intra-abdominal content, and you get compression there. And the compression want to go out. So with this kind of exercise, while you are training your rectus muscle, at the same time you are increasing your diastasis recti. And that was what you didn't want. So this is definitely not a good exercise. So how can we get the same effect without this exercise? And there are different ways. I'm just showing you one. There are different ideas, but this was going to skip this one, I think. That's not so important. I'm going to skip this one. No, come on. This one. This is the one. So lay supine. Get your dynabend. Fix it behind you. And then from above your head, just lift your head a little bit from the surface. Because if you don't do that, you start, how do you say that? Compensating by pushing your head against the surface. And then your arms and your abdomen are not working at all. So your head should not be in contact with the floor. But don't start really lifting your head. That's not good. Just lift it a little bit from the floor. And then the motion is that your arms, oh yeah, I got some extra text here. So you move your arms toward your knees. And in this motion, you will feel your rectus abdominis contracting. And if you do it properly and gently, it will give you the action of only contracting rectus abdominis and nothing else. If you see bulging, go back, relax, start again. And what you could do is exhale. If you exhale, you enlarge the intra-abdominal space, which gives the intra-abdominal pressure as low as possible. And that's very important. So you start really low level, just a little pull, not much force. And in this picture, the wrong idea is that you really have to lift your shoulders. That's not good. So keep your shoulders on the floor. Just lift your head a bit and then make the motion with your arms. In the initial phase, that is sufficient. And only when you can control it, then you can increase force a bit. So this is the part of the rectus muscle. But that's not the only thing, because we also have, okay, that's what I said. Okay, oh, come on, stop it. Okay, that's what I said. But then we also want to contract transverse abdominis. Now, it is really hard to really isolated contract rectus abdominis. So in the exercise, you will always increase just a little bit internus and externus muscle. But if you do it gently, that's not a problem. So how are we going to do that? You have the same posture like this, but now the elastic band is not behind you, it's side of you. You put your arms out, and your arms are like one triangle, and your feet are also one triangle. And the aim is to move your arms and shoulders like one fixed triangle relative to your hips. If you do it properly, your shoulders will move, the motion will take place in the abdominal area here. So it's not a motion of your shoulders, it's a motion of the abdomen. And again, the motion is very small. It's only about 30 centimeters. You start with one shoulder, you move to the other shoulder, go back and relax again. So it's a small motion. And you initiate the action from the abdomen. It's very important that during the motion, you keep looking at your hands. Now that sounds silly. Why should I look at my hands? I can look the other ways. And no, if you move your shoulders without looking at your hands, your spine won't move along. If you keep looking at your hands, your whole spine will move along with your hands, and that will help you to get the power from your abdomen and not from your shoulders. So looking at your hands is really important. And there's another trick I want to tell you. If you make this motion and you succeed in getting the power from your abdomen, you will notice that when you go back in the motion, your abdomen will say, okay, I'm ready, I'm relaxing again, but try to hold on. Try to keep the power until you're back and only then relax. And then another trick is you're relaxed, you start making the motion, go back, and then some people keep their tension, which is a mistake too. Relax, inhale once or twice, and then make the next motion. Because again, it's a coordination exercise. It's not a power exercise. So the relaxation in between helps your body to understand, now I can be relaxed, now I have to contract again. It's really low level. And during the exercise, you should not see or hardly see any bulging. Maybe in the beginning, just a little bit, but if you have too much bulging, the motion is too heavy, you're going too quick, go back and relax again. This is what you should do for the exercises. Okay. And when you're in control, you have control over the exercise, then you can start increasing the repetitions or the resistance or something like that. But always make sure you are in control, and that will help you to build up the control over your diastasis recti. So we're almost already half an hour far. I think I'm rather good in my timing, I think, Jackie. So in conclusion, if we talk about diastasis recti, I think we should consider it a functional problem and not predominantly a structural failure. Because if it's a functional problem, you can train it. If it's a structural problem and you're stuck with it, then you can do nothing about it unless you operate it. But I think you can do much more by functionally training. And it has to do with the disturbed control of the abdominal wall, like I explained in this presentation. So diastasis recti should be considered a symptom and not a self-contained disease. And one of the questions, Jackie, you had is that there could be a disturbance in balance in people with diastasis recti. And I think that there are many patients who have diastasis recti because it's part of a disrupted system in control over the pelvis and the lumbar spine. And you see in these patients that they also have control of a loss of control of balance. So the answer to this question is yes. If you have a diastasis recti, it can also to some loss of control of balance, definitely. What you also very often hear is that people say, yeah, I have diastasis recti, and because of that, I have back pain. Actually, I think it's the other way around. If you have back pain, you could also end up with diastasis recti because of the suppression of transverse abdominis muscle. So So if you're training, try to focus on the system, not on the structure. And training definitely should be part of recovery from diastasis recti. And I think there are some extreme situations where surgery may support diastasis recti. But be cautious because we also understand that if you have a surgical intervention in your abdomen, that means a kind of wound in your abdomen. And we know that transverse abdominis also reacts to that. So if you get surgery, don't think that you've solved the problem right away. Also, after surgery, you need some training to get your abdomen in the right shape. So please take care of that. So, Jackie, that was my presentation.
Thank you
Exactly
very
half an
much.
hour.
You did. That was really, really interesting. I found that fascinating. And yes, we do have lots of questions for you, Jan Paul.
Okay. Shall I stop my sharing and that we can have
It's
some
up to
free?
you. You can do. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Either way.
There we are again. So
Okay. Well,
let's have the questions.
okay. So we will start with, should all women start with exercises shortly after pregnancy, in your
Um,
opinion?
yeah, but um, it's like a bit the same question. If people ask you, if I break my leg, should I start exercise right away? No. I should, the first days, take care of yourself and give yourself some time, your body some time to just recover from giving delivery, if you say it like that. So just give yourself some time, maybe a few days or maybe a week or so. Of course, you can do some slight activities, maybe take a shower or something like that, but don't do too much. And then, you know, I will give you an I'll give you an interesting exercise. Um, the muscle I've been talking about, transverse abdominis, it functions with control of our abdomen, but it also functions in our breathing system. So if you're after pregnancy and you want to know what can I do with my body, just try breathing. See if you can get some abdominal breathing. See if you can exhale with some more force, like the blowing through your lips, like this. If you do that and you exhale, in the end of the exhalation, you will already find your abdominal muscles contracting a little bit. And from there on, just start exercising. So it's not an easy answer. On the one hand, can I start exercising really quick? Yeah, you could do that, but please give yourself some time and don't overrush it. Is that an answer, Jackie?
That's a perfect answer. And I think
Okay.
in the part you've also answered my next question was with the transverse abdominis, can that lead to breathing issues for patients with a diastasis?
Definitely, definitely. Now, well, that's if you have another half an hour, I can talk about that. But what we notice is that this control of our abdomen, you know the term abdominal breathing?
Yeah.
Is that a familiar term? Uh, it's nonsense because we don't get air in our abdomen. But the trick is, if your diaphragm wants to go down, your abdomen is a liquid-filled balloon, and the liquid cannot be compressed. So if your diaphragm wants to go down, your abdomen has to give way. So for inhaling, your abdominal wall has to relax. And now we all know these pretty ladies who want to have a very tight tummy and they pull in their tummy, they can't breathe because they have to relax their tummy to inhale. So the dynamics of our abdominal wall is very important in breathing. And if you have a disturbed function because you have back problems, because you have diastasis, it can be for sure that you also have some breathing problems also. They're all connected. Definitely.
So do you think that all diastasis can be corrected with physiotherapy?
Honestly,
Yeah.
no, no. And the reason is I've seen some real extreme diastasis where the rectus was actually lateral of the abdominal wall. And I have to say that was not because of pregnancy, that was after surgery, an incisional hernia. but that was so extreme that this person could not train whatsoever. So I would not say that we can correct all diastasis recti. What I would say is you always have to try to see if exercise helps before you try surgery. Because even if afterwards you feel that surgery is really necessary, the practice you've had will help you with recovery afterwards.
Can every physiotherapist treat this, or should people look for a specialist physiotherapist?
Well, I know in England there's Grace Donnelly. She's doing a real good job. But one of the points is you have to understand the subtlety of the exercises. And I don't know how it's in England, but I know in Holland that many physical therapists, they think they have to train hard to get people better. And that is a bad advice. So I think physical therapists can definitely help you to train diastasis, but please ask them, how are we going to train? Are you going to be gentle on coordination and have control? Or are you going to give me all kinds of exercises where my belly comes out and I'm only making it worse? Because that's not what you want. And there will be good physical therapists, definitely, but beware what they're trying to tell you. Be in control yourself. That's very important.
Take control of your thing and ask questions. That's good advice. So the exercise is what you've shown tonight as examples. How many times a day do you think they should be done? And for
Yeah,
how
that's a
long?
very good question. Like I said, they are coordinative exercises, which means do them as often as possible, but don't do them very heavy or with very much repetitions. So it's better to try it about 5 or 6 times over the day, just for a few minutes with a slight resistance and see if your abdominal starts working, than that you do 2 exercises a day with a heavy load. Your belly won't get better from that, but it's repetition. So low level, very frequently. Is that an answer to your question?
It is. So how long do you think if you're training your diastasis with physiotherapy and with exercise, how long would it normally take to recover? Or is that a loaded question?
Well, that's also an interesting and rather difficult question because what I think is in the first 2 weeks, if you learn how to contract your abdominal wall, you very quickly will find that it will give you some more control of what you're doing. So we see many ladies who have very little control, like when they're in the supermarket with this cart and they can't put it across the around the corner. If you learn to contract your abdominal wall properly, within 2 weeks it will improve. But then there comes the next phase where you really have to get some more power in control, and that takes some longer. So altogether, I think you should take about maybe half a year to a year before you know how much control you regained. So in the beginning, it will be very quick, but then afterwards it take a long time because before you're fully recovered.
And when would you know that physiotherapy isn't working and you need to see a surgeon?
Say, well, there are different levels again. If you start practicing these exercises and there is no way you can control what's happening because it's popping out every time, you can't build up, nothing's working, maybe then it's time, maybe it's first time to get another physical therapist who maybe has somewhat other approach. That can be one of the tricks. But if you try 2 physical therapists and both has the same result, maybe you should talk to a surgeon then.
What about abdominal binders? You know, the
Yeah.
hernia support. What do you think about those for diastasis?
You have so good questions, but the answers are so difficult because it's not a one of one situation. Okay. If you have an insecure situation in your abdomen and you don't have the proper control, then the binder can help you to get some extra support, which may just after pregnancy or after delivery may help you to have some support there. But the counter side of it is the moment you use the support, you're allowed to do your activities in another way and not use your abdominal wall. So while the abdominal support on the one hand may help you to get some early recovery after giving birth, in the long run, it will be counterproductive because it prevents your abdominal wall to taking up the function itself. So somewhere along the way, you have to decide, okay, now I'm going to get down on using the binders and getting more on my proper abdominal wall function. And if you're insecure about that, ask your physical therapist to coach you in that, to see how it works. So initially using it, yeah, perfectly. Afterwards, not so good. I have a nice story about that. I gave a course last week to physical therapists, and there was a guy there who was doing some really heavy lifting in the fitness gym, and he had a terrible abdominal wall. And he said, "Well, I'm always using this band while lifting." But what happened while lifting, instead of contracting his abdominal wall, he pushed it against the band and never got a proper function. So he trained like mad, but did not get better because was functionally totally the wrong way around. And that's what I want to say. You can use binders for some support, but beware that they may prevent the proper function of your abdominal wall.
Yeah.
All right?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Okay. So do you think that physiotherapy exercises like we've talked about can also reduce complaints from abdominal wall hernias or inguinal hernias?
That's a very, I think you should ask that to a surgeon because
That was a
what
surgeon asking you.
okay. Well, yeah. There's a difficult thing there because if there's some muscle in the area, you can train it. But if there's no muscle or no muscle having some influence on the context you're working, you can have nothing to train there. So if your hernia is somewhere in the on the level of the umbilicus, somewhere above or below, you could do some training. But if your herniation is really low in the pelvic floor area, just below, in the groin area, in that area there's very little muscle. So you can hardly train that. So if you have a real herniation there, then that could be difficult to train. Um, I was thinking about something else about the herniation. Oh yeah, one thing I wanted to say. There's very often that people say, I have a diastasis, I have herniation. But I think there's a big difference between a diastasis and a herniation. Like I showed you, in the diastasis, the intra-abdominal fascia is going out, but there's a complete structure. If you have a real herniation, there is some kind of tear in the tissue. And that's more difficult to heal. So that's the part where I'll stop my talk and let the surgeons talk, because that's not my expertise.
I think Edwina, you have a question. Do you want to? You're on mute, love.
There. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, this has all been really interesting. And I've
Nice,
had a
thank you.
really big lesson in hernias over the last 2 years. I have a extremely large hernia, and it's a hiatus and it's moving. So
Yeah,
it impacts my stomach, but mostly my lungs. So I'm
yeah,
finding it impossible to breathe.
yeah.
Seriously, only a few steps, which is odd because I was actually a professional ballet dancer.
Yeah.
Anyway, I actually do know the exercises that you've suggested, and it seems that my recti muscles have pulled apart, and there's
Yeah.
actually a hernia in the middle. So, do you think it's possible? I mean, so now it's impacting my breathing so much, and it was misdiagnosed for 2 years. But is there any point in trying to do these exercises? Because I'm hoping that my hernia will be repaired or sorted out in February.
Yeah.
And then I think that's when the big work has to start. I don't know. I mean, you've answered loads of questions for me. I don't know whether I'm going to get to the stage where my recti muscles will be sorted, without an operation because it's quite severe. But
Okay.
which way would you think? And the breathing.
Yeah. Okay, Edwina,
Breathing is my
thank you.
problem. Does that make sense?
Thank you for your question. It's a very good question. I think it's a question which is very hard to answer because I don't exactly know your complete situation.
Mm,
But maybe I can give you some clues which may give you some suggestions you can work on.
okay.
Like I said, the abdominal wall is like a balloon with fluid.
Hmm.
That means it responds and reacts to gravity. So if you're laying supine, the abdominal content will press down and go to your pelvic floor, but also push towards your diaphragm.
Right.
So when you're laying down, your diaphragm will be in an expiration position mainly.
Hmm.
From there, you could activate diastasis to inhale and then exhale again. But that will take a lot of work from your diastasis or from your diaphragm. Sorry.
Yeah.
If you're standing upright, the situation changes completely because then the gravity will pull your abdomen down and with that pull your diaphragm down. And I think in that situation, breathing for you is difficult because if your abdominal wall is not functioning the way it should, it's very difficult for the abdominal wall to press in the abdominal content to exhale again. Now, maybe the solution is somewhere in between. So my suggestion to you is experiment with the position you should have for an optimal breathing pattern. So not completely flat, but not completely upright.
Mm.
Because if you're somewhere in between, then the effect of the gravity will change. And maybe somewhere in between, 45 degrees, 30 degrees, it will be easier to control the breathing, I think. But that's something you should practice.
Yeah.
And I think maybe for this presentation it's a bit too much. But if you have questions on that respect, through Jackie we can get in contact and maybe can give you some more specific
Would
advice
you
on this
mind?
because it's
I'm
very
really,
depending on the wall.
I know I'm learning so much because I didn't even know what a hernia was 3 years ago.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
but that's really, really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Good luck with the surgery.
Ah,
Yeah,
when it comes.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, Jackie.
I think that's so. My last question we have is how do patients get diagnosed with this, and how do we convince our GPs, especially, that it's not just a cosmetic problem, that it actually needs some treatment?
Well, maybe first of all, we should get rid of all the internet things you read and
Mm.
see, and which people completely make each other mad at what's happening. And I think some proper information for GPs should be a good idea. Um, and there's a lot of work we have to do. We're now in touch with some surgeons, and like you see in the presentation, people are really getting interested because the surgical techniques they are really fine, but what we also need to have is some understanding on how the abdominal wall responds or reacts to what we do on it. And that's not only with surgical interventions, but also after pregnancy, with back pain, even something like long COVID can be something that changes the abdominal wall function. And we really have to know more and then share that with GPs, surgeons, other disciplines. And there's so much work to do. And I hope that this webinar will contribute to getting some information over to the people.
I'm sure it will, because I mean, at the end of the day, if patients are struggling to get the GPs to understand, then they can always refer them to this to watch to be able to understand
Yeah,
what it's all about. Well, Jean
definitely.
Paul, thank you so much. That has been a really interesting evening. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself and learnt lots from you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much for your time. Oh, wait a minute, I've got one new message.
I see a
Yeah.
compliment coming by. Thank you, Deborah.
Yes, thank you. That was excellent and will be so useful for lots of patients. Thank you, Deborah.
Good.
So thank you, John Paul, and I look forward to speaking to you again very shortly.
Okay. Thank you very
Thank
much for
you.
listening to
Thank you,
me.
everybody. Take care.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.